When we think of vampires, our minds often go straight to black cloaks, glowing red eyes, and fangs that flash in the darkness. But what lies beneath that iconic image? Have you ever wondered where the idea of the vampire truly began? Are they merely the offspring of imagination? Or are they remnants of a much older fear? In this video, we'll follow the footsteps of creatures said to rise from the earth. We'll step into sealed tombs, long hidden from the world, and open a door that leads deep into the true origin of the vampire legend. So fasten your seatbelt as we dive into today's mystery. But first, if you like and subscribe before the video ends, some incredible luck just might find its way to you. Before Dracula ever appeared in finely printed novels or walked across London stages draped in black velvet, the image of the vampire had already haunted the minds of villagers throughout Central and Eastern Europe. In those places, people did not regard vampires as cultural symbols or literary characters. To them, these beings were real, entities that could return after death, seeking out their dearest loved ones to steal their lives away in the freezing darkness of night. What's especially interesting is that the very word vampire, the one we're all so familiar with today, did not come from Romania, despite Romania being widely seen as the birthplace of Dracula. In truth, Romanians had a different word for this creature, strigoi, a much older term that traces its roots to the Greek word strix, which originally referred to the owl, a nocturnal creature long regarded as a harbinger of misfortune. Meanwhile, the term vampire came from Slavic lands, showing up in forms like upir in Russian, and similar versions across other Slavic languages. Linguistically, these words carried meanings like flying creature, or something that didn't belong to this world, yet could still appear without warning in the dead of night, breaking the silence and shattering the peace of ordinary lives. Alongside the strigoi, ancient people also believed in other dark beings like the vrkolikas of Greece or the moroi of Romania. Each name was a fragment of fear passed down through generations, each variation a reflection of an old and localized terror. And though these names differed across regions, they all pointed to the same chilling image. A vampire was a being that rose again after death. What made these creatures so terrifying was not just what they looked like, it was who they used to be. Unlike mythical monsters like dragons or demons, a vampire could once have been a member of your own family. They might have been a kind neighbor or someone you had shared meals with. But when they died, something inside them turned. And on a certain night, they would return with a ferocity that no one could stop. In the modern world, where death is often tucked away behind the closed doors of hospitals or hidden beneath the stillness of graveyards, we tend to forget that there was once a time when death was a vivid, ever-present part of everyday life. It wasn't seen simply as the end of a person's existence, but rather the beginning of a new relationship between the living and the departed. Across countless ancient cultures, from the Nile River Valley to the northern mountains of Europe, people didn't just bury their dead, they tended to them as if their souls still lingered nearby. The ancient Romans would leave sweet cakes, milk, and wine at the graves of their loved ones. The Celts buried small portions of food, everyday objects, and in some cases, entire meals, meant to nourish the soul beyond the grave. In medieval Ireland, gravestones were sometimes carved with holes, allowing food or drink to be passed down into the tomb, as if the person inside still needed to eat, still lived in some way. And in Homer's Odyssey, when Odysseus sought to speak with the spirit of his dead mother, he was instructed to pour blood into a pit, because only by tasting blood could the dead regain consciousness and remember who they once were. To modern ears, these rituals might sound like superstition, but in truth, they reflect a deep and ancient philosophy shared across civilizations, that the dead do not leave us immediately. They remain close by, and if their needs are not fulfilled, those spirits may grow restless, angry, and even return to reclaim what they believe was unjustly lost. In hundreds of folk accounts from Romania, Serbia, Hungary, Poland, and Greece, there are stories of bodies being exhumed after a series of strange and sudden deaths in the village. And what people found was disturbing. Corpses that were still intact, lips red with blood, and the sickly scent of rot mixed with something warm and metallic, as though death had never truly taken hold. In many rural communities across Eastern Europe, memories still persist of the strange rituals performed to keep the dead in their place. Iron nails driven through the chest, large stones laid on the abdomen, garlic stuffed into the mouth, and the lips sewn shut with red thread. These were not fantastical legends. They were desperate acts, born from the belief that the dead were not staying buried. In the memory of ancient Europeans, death was never seen as a peaceful conclusion. It was a state caught somewhere between life and something that had not yet truly ended. Not every soul departed the earthly realm willingly, and not every corpse remained still beneath the cold ground. Centuries before the image of the modern vampire came into being, northern cultures had their own concept for this phenomenon, the draugr. In Norse legend, the draugr was not some intangible ghost, but the literal reanimated body of the dead. These beings rose from snow-covered burial mounds with corpses intact and possessed strength far beyond that of any living person. They could change their shape, invade the dreams of the living, press down upon their chests like a suffocating nightmare, and unleash terror wherever they roamed. They were not burned by sunlight, nor repelled by mirrors or holy water, because they were not spirits. They were the walking dead, in the most physical and terrifying sense of the word. And to destroy one, you had to decapitate it, burn the body, or fight it back into its grave with your bare hands. Similar creatures also appear in Celtic tradition, where the revenant, the returned dead, could come back to their homes, knock on familiar doors, and seek out the very people who had forgotten them. These were not mindless husks wandering aimlessly. They were beings with memory, with intention, and with ties that still bound them to the living. What's especially telling is that in many of these old stories, beings like the draugr and revenant often emerged from graves that had been carefully, even anxiously, secured. These burials weren't just about honoring the dead. They were designed to imprison them. Some bodies were pinned beneath massive stones, bound at the wrists and ankles, or buried face down. These were not symbols of wealth or status. They were measures of containment, a last attempt to keep the dead from rising in living form. When archaeologists study burial sites from the Iron Age or the medieval period in Europe, they frequently find remains in strange positions, faces turned into the earth, jaws held shut by stones, or mouths stuffed with bricks or gravel. Not everyone was buried this way. Only those suspected of being able to return, or who, for some reason, made the living feel uneasy, were treated so. From the draugr in the Norse sagas, to the revenants in Irish folklore, the strigoi of Romanian legend, and the upir of the Slavic tribes, one truth becomes increasingly clear. The vampire was never a single defined creature. It was a composite, formed from memory, belief, fear, and cultural residue, shaped over thousands of years. When plague swept through the villages of Central Europe in the 17th century, people began to die without any clear explanation. First, it was a neighbor, then a sister, then an infant in its cradle, all gone after just a few nights of feverish delirium. There were no wounds, no signs of physical attack. And when the entire community found itself without answers, they began to form a chilling theory. Something had returned from the earth, something that silently drained the living of their very life force. They called it a vampire, and from that moment on, a series of rituals took shape. Rituals meant to destroy the creature and put an end to its grip on the living. In many regions, wooden stakes were driven through the heart. In others, the heads were removed, stones were forced into the mouth, or the body was burned to ash. Strangely, in many of these legends, the vampire didn't always need to drink blood to kill. Sometimes, simply seeing one, encountering it in a dream, or merely sensing its presence was enough for it to drain a person of life. And this made the vampire utterly unlike any physical beast, unlike wolves, or snakes, or bears, because this was not a threat from the outside. It was something that lived inside the human mind. In ancient Greece, the creature known as the vrikolakas didn't drink blood. It consumed human flesh. In the Balkans, there are accounts claiming that after killing their victims, Vampires would return home and sit at the family table as if nothing had ever happened. And in some cases, the one suspected of being a vampire wasn't someone already dead, it was someone still living. All of these beliefs reflect one unshakable truth. Humans fear what happens after death, and even more than that, we fear the moment when death turns around and comes walking back to us in the dark. In many ancient legends, the vampire was not merely a bringer of death, but a creature that awakened something far stranger, a sense of allure, seduction, and threat, all tangled into one. Unlike savage beasts that killed without thought, the vampire often appeared in a form that was familiar or even beautiful. Across parts of the Balkans, people once believed that male vampires would return to seek out women they had once loved in life. They didn't come back only to drink blood, but to lie beside these women, to hold them in their sleep, and at times, to make love to them. In many folktales, there are detailed accounts of children born from these unions between the living and the undead. In Slavic regions, they were called dampir. In Romanian tradition, they were known as moroi. These children, according to legend, were not demons, yet neither were they fully human. They were said to be born with strange abilities, the power to see ghosts, to hear voices from the realm of the dead, and in some versions of the myth, they were the only ones capable of hunting and destroying vampires. Behind these strange tales lies a deeper, more unsettling fear, a fear that death and life might somehow merge, producing something that human understanding was never meant to grasp. In some places, the legends went even further. It was believed that the strigoi wasn't always a corpse risen from the grave, but could also be a living witch, someone who, at night, could send her soul out of her body to drink the blood of others. These wandering souls were often thought to be women, and they were labeled as living vampires. They were said to slip silently into men's rooms at midnight, drain them of their blood, or leave behind bite marks on the neck, marks no one could explain. In the context of ancient societies, where desire was taboo and women were denied personal agency, casting the image of an independent, sexually uninhibited woman as a vampire was a way to turn her into an object of fear. She became a symbol of something forbidden, something that unsettled the rules of order. The vampire, then, was not just a monster. He was the embodiment of repressed desire, of unspoken yearning, and of the forbidden union between life and death. Within him existed love and possession, temptation and violence, seduction and a bloodlust that never fades. For thousands of years, the image of the vampire has quietly drifted through the centuries. From a corpse clawing its way out of the grave, to the silhouette of a bloodthirsty lover wandering the halls of a Transylvanian castle, and finally to a pop culture icon, with solemn eyes and pale skin glowing faintly under the moonlight. But no matter how many times the surface changes, the core has always remained the same. The vampire is a reflection of our deepest fears, our unspoken regrets, and the desires we dare not name. Perhaps, as many scholars have suggested, the vampire obsession that gripped 17th century Europe didn't come from plague or from sorcery, but from something much simpler and far more painful. The living no longer knew how to speak to the dead. And from that silence, the story of the vampire took root. A creature both terrifying and familiar, both cruel and lonely. It came to watch, to call out names, to remind the living that forgetting is the cruelest betrayal of all. So perhaps the vampire was never just a blood-sucking monster. He is what remains of a broken promise, of a death left unfinished, of a soul that was once human, no longer recognized as such. Within him lies the shadow of a mother who lost her child, a child buried the wrong way, a husband who died in a distant land with no one to bring him home. And if the vampire still lives on in legends today, perhaps it is not because he is immortal, but because we have never truly learned how to say goodbye. You may not believe in vampires, but if something in this story made you pause and reflect, then feel free to share your thoughts in the comments below. And if you'd like to keep exploring forgotten mysteries with me, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. I'll see you on the next journey.